The sun had just risen over Oak Ridge Park, casting golden light through the trees and onto the paved jogging path that wound through the quiet upscale neighborhood. The birds chirped a cheerful melody, and the air smelled fresh with a hint of dew. For Selena Grant, this was her favorite time of day. Dressed in a sleek black athletic outfit with wireless earbuds snugly in place, she jogged along the path at a steady pace, her breathing rhythmic and calm. She loved these early morning runs, her chance to unwind and reflect before a busy day. As the head of internal affairs for the state police, Selena's life was anything but ordinary. At 38 years old, she had climbed to one of the highest positions in law enforcement, earning respect for her fearless dedication to rooting out corruption and holding officers accountable. Her job wasn't easy. Pushing for justice often meant making enemies, but she took pride in her work and knew the change she was fighting for was worth it. Recently, she had moved into the affluent Oak Ridge Park neighborhood, not to flaunt her success, but for the peace it offered. It was a place where she could breathe away from the noise of the city. With her favorite podcast on police reform playing in her ears, Selena focused on the rhythm of her steps and let the world melt away, until the sound of a slow-moving car broke her concentration. In a police cruiser crawling along the jogging path's edge, Officer Thomas Hale gripped the steering wheel and narrowed his eyes. To him, the sight of Selena, a black woman jogging in a predominantly white neighborhood, didn't sit right. Thomas had worked the Oak Ridge beat for years, and he thought of himself as a gatekeeper for the community. Raised by a father who had been a high-ranking officer, Thomas grew up believing authority wasn't just a responsibility but a weapon to maintain order, or at least his version of it. His father had instilled in him a mindset that some people didn't belong in certain places, and Thomas had fully embraced that belief. As he watched Selena jog, his prejudice filled in the blanks. She must be up to no good, he thought. His mind concocted a scenario, a suspicious person report. He decided to investigate on his own without a shred of evidence. He flipped on his lights and pulled his car to a stop ahead of her. Selena slowed her pace, raising an eyebrow at the patrol car blocking her path. A slight frown crossed her face as she pulled out one earbud. This wasn't the first time she'd been unfairly stopped, but it didn't make it any less frustrating. Little did Thomas know, the woman he was about to confront wasn't just another jogger. Thomas stepped out of his patrol car, his expression hard and unwelcoming. His uniform was crisp, and his posture exuded authority, but there was a sharp edge to his demeanor. "Hey, you," he barked, pointing towards Selena as she stopped jogging. "What are you doing here?" Selena furrowed her brow, confused by the hostility in his tone. She gestured to her workout clothes and a small water bottle strapped to her waist. "I'm jogging," she said simply, her voice calm and measured. Thomas wasn't having it. "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. "We got a report about a suspicious person matching your description, trespassing and possibly involved in theft. Care to explain yourself?" Selena blinked, taken aback by the blatant accusation. "Excuse me? I live around here. I jog this path every morning." But Thomas didn't listen. He folded his arms and looked her up and down with suspicion. "You got any ID on you?" he demanded. Selena sighed, already feeling her patience being tested. "I left it at home. I wasn't expecting to need it for a run." Thomas smirked as though he'd caught her in a lie. "Convenient. So, no proof you live here? No ID? You know what that looks like, right?" By now, a few onlookers had gathered at a safe distance, whispering and filming the exchange on their phones. Selena glanced at them, realizing this was quickly escalating into a scene. She took a deep breath, her voice steady but firm. "Officer, I'm telling you the truth. I live 2 blocks from here. This is a misunderstanding." Thomas stepped closer, towering over her. "Misunderstanding? Look, lady, I don't have time for games. Either you cooperate, or we're going to have a problem." Selena's jaw tightened. She didn't want to make this worse, but she also knew her rights. "Officer, I'm going to ask you to think carefully about what you're doing," she said, her tone quiet but laced with authority. "You're making a mistake." Thomas's eyes narrowed, mistaking her warning for defiance. "Oh, is that a threat? You think you can intimidate me?" He reached for his handcuffs. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Selena didn't move. Her voice dropped lower, calm but unyielding. Officer, I'm telling you, back off. You have no idea who I am. To Thomas, her composure only fueled his anger. He grabbed her arm, attempting to twist it behind her back. But Selena moved with surprising agility, slipping out of his grip with ease. The onlookers gasped, their phones capturing every second. Thomas was stunned for a moment before his face twisted in frustration. That's resisting arrest, he shouted, reaching for his radio. Selena didn't flinch. She locked eyes with him, her expression calm and resolute. No, officer. That's me reminding you that you've just crossed a line you can't uncross. Thomas's frustration boiled over as he yanked out his handcuffs. You've resisted long enough, he growled, grabbing Selena's wrist and snapping the cuffs into place. She didn't fight back, allowing him to force her hands behind her back. The roughness of his grip made several bystanders flinch, their murmurs growing louder. What's wrong with you, man? She didn't even do anything, shouted a young man holding his phone, recording the scene from a few feet away. Yeah, let her go, chimed in an older woman clutching her dog's leash. A small crowd had formed, and nearly every person had their phones out, documenting every move Thomas made. Step back, Thomas barked at the onlookers, his voice tinged with panic as the weight of their judgment began to press on him. His hand shook slightly, but he clenched his jaw to mask any sign of weakness. Turning back to Selena, he tightened the cuffs unnecessarily, making her wince. Selena remained calm even as Thomas pushed her toward the patrol car. You're making a scene, she said softly, her tone more disappointed than angry. You made the scene. Thomas shot back, opening the back door of the car. All you had to do was cooperate. Selena stepped into the car with an air of composure that only aggravated Thomas further. She turned her head slightly to meet his gaze. I warned you. You'll regret this by the end of the day. Her cryptic words lingered in Thomas's mind as he slammed the car door shut. Yeah, we'll see about that, he muttered under his breath, radioing for backup. He exaggerated the situation, his voice cracking slightly. This is Officer Hale, Oak Ridge Park. I've detained a suspect. Violent. Resisted arrest. Need backup immediately. The onlookers gasped in disbelief. Violent? She didn't do anything, one woman yelled, her voice rising over the chatter. We've got it all on video. You can't lie your way out of this, a man in the crowd called out. But Thomas ignored them, doubling down as he waved them away. Clear the area. This is a police matter, he shouted. Selena sat quietly in the back of the patrol car, her expression unreadable. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips, one that Thomas couldn't see but would haunt him later. She watched as he tried to manage the growing crowd, the pressure mounting with every phone pointed in his direction. As the patrol car pulled away, the onlookers continued recording, shouting after Thomas that they would post the videos online. Selena leaned back in her seat, her calm demeanor unwavering. She knew that the truth would catch up with Thomas faster than he could imagine. Back at the station, Thomas walked through the double doors with a smug sense of accomplishment. He still felt the eyes of the onlookers in Oak Ridge Park on him, their judgment lingering in his mind. But he brushed it off. He had followed procedure, at least in his eyes. Now, it was time to process this suspect and move on with his day. Selena stepped out of the patrol car calmly, her wrists still cuffed but her head held high. Thomas led her into the booking area, ignoring her warnings and the curious stares of other officers. One for trespassing and resisting arrest, he announced loudly, slapping her paperwork onto the counter. She got a little feisty back there. Selena raised an eyebrow at his description but said nothing. She simply watched as he fumbled through the forms, his confidence radiating like a beacon. She didn't have to say much. She knew what was coming. Thomas's sense of victory was short-lived. The station's main doors burst open, and Captain Marina Blackwood stormed in. Marina was a no-nonsense woman with sharp features and an air of authority that silenced the room the moment she entered. She clutched a tablet in one hand and a printout in the other, her jaw tight with anger. "Hale," she barked, her voice echoing through the station. Thomas froze mid-sentence. his pen hovering over the paperwork. He turned to face Marina, his smirk fading the moment he saw the look on her face. Captain Blackwood," he stammered, trying to maintain his composure. "I was just processing." "Save it," Marina snapped, cutting him off. She slammed the tablet down on the counter, the screen displaying a live-streamed video of Thomas's arrest of Selena. The footage had gone viral within minutes, showing Thomas's aggressive behavior and the bystanders' protests. Marina held up the paperwork Thomas had filed. "Trespassing? Resisting arrest? Feisty?" she quoted, her voice dripping with disbelief and anger. "Do you even know who this is?" Thomas blinked, glancing nervously at Selena, who now wore a faint smile. "She said she lived in the area." "But she's Selena Grant," Marina interrupted, her voice sharp, "the head of internal affairs for the state police department. Your boss's boss." Thomas's heart sank, his face draining of color. He turned to Selena, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to form words. "I didn't know." "That much is clear," Marina said, her voice icy. "You've just humiliated yourself, this station, and our entire department. You've made every mistake you possibly could in one encounter." Thomas's mind raced as the weight of his mistake crushed him. Selena stepped forward, her calm demeanor unwavering. "I told you you'd regret this by the end of the day," she said quietly, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. Marina looked at Selena, her expression softening. "We'll handle this, Miss Grant. Rest assured. This officer will face consequences." She shot Thomas a glare that made him shrink in place. Thomas's confidence crumbled as he realized the full extent of his actions. This wasn't just a bad day at work. This was a career-ending mistake. As the gravity of the situation set in, Marina turned to Selena. "I'll leave this in your hands," she said firmly. With a nod, Selena stepped forward, finally freed from the handcuffs by a visibly shaken officer. She adjusted her sleeves, her calm but commanding voice filling the room. "I want an immediate review of Officer Hale's history. Every stop, every report, every complaint filed against him." Her words sent a ripple through the room, and the officers nearby exchanged nervous glances. Thomas stood frozen, unable to respond. Marina snapped her fingers at another officer. "Pull his file. Now." Within minutes, Thomas's record was laid bare on the station's computer. A disturbing pattern emerged: multiple stops of black and minority individuals for minor or fabricated infractions, an alarming number of use-of-force incidents, and ignored warnings from supervisors. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of a man unfit for his badge. "Officer Thomas Hale," Selena began, her tone unwavering. "You've not only violated my rights, but also betrayed the trust of this community and the integrity of the police force. This ends now." Marina stepped in, pulling the badge from Thomas's chest with one sharp motion. "You're officially stripped of your badge and authority, effective immediately. Consider yourself suspended, without pay pending further charges." The room was silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioning. Thomas's face burned red as he stammered. But this isn't fair. I didn't know who she was." Selena turned to him, her expression both calm and cutting. "You didn't have to know who I was. You only needed to treat me with the respect and fairness every citizen deserves. And you failed." Meanwhile, the video of the arrest, which had already been spreading across social media, reached national news outlets. Headlines like "Racial Profiling Gone Wrong," "Cop Arrests Head of Internal Affairs," and "Justice in Action, Corruption Exposed" flooded the internet. The public was outraged, and calls for systemic reform grew louder with each passing hour. Selena faced the cameras outside the station later that day, standing tall with Captain Marina beside her. "This incident is not just about one bad officer," she said firmly. "It's about a culture that allows this behavior to go unchecked. That stops now. We will hold every officer accountable." Starting here, the crowd cheered, their faith in change momentarily restored. Thomas, meanwhile, watched from the side, still in shock at how quickly his world had crumbled. Months later, the ripple effects of Thomas's actions were still unfolding. Selena's leadership had led to a sweeping investigation of the local police force, uncovering deeper issues of misconduct and abuse of power. Several other officers faced disciplinary action. While reforms were implemented to prevent further injustices, Selena became a national figure in the fight for police accountability. Her arrest video, while initially shocking, became a rallying cry for change. She spoke at conferences, appeared on news programs, and worked tirelessly to rebuild trust between law enforcement and communities of color. The public hailed her as a symbol of resilience and justice. Meanwhile, Thomas's life took a very different turn. After being convicted of misconduct and stripped of his certification, he struggled to find work. With no badge and a tarnished reputation, he was forced to take a job as a parking lot attendant. The once arrogant officer now spent his days handing out tickets. His pride shattered. One afternoon, as he worked under the blazing sun, Thomas noticed a TV playing inside a nearby diner. Through the window, he saw Selena standing at a podium, receiving a prestigious national award for her contributions to police reform. The audience applauded, and Selena's face lit up with a gracious smile. Thomas froze, his stomach twisting in knots. The memory of that day in Oak Ridge Park flooded back, her calm warnings, the onlookers' protests, and his own hubris, all playing on a loop in